Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's college football betting pick show, the Saturday of October 10th, 2020. My name is Dylan Burd, and this is the Sports Burd podcast. I'm really excited to look at the slate today. Really excited to get going. I went 2-3 on spread picks last week, which is not great. Brings my record to an even 8-8 on the year. But the good news is that I did hit my long shot moneyline parlay. TCU and Ole Miss both got wins on the road as pretty substantial underdogs. I hit that parlay at 11-1. As a result, I went up money for the weekend. And that's what's so great about these long shot moneyline parlays is that you bet one each week for the entire season, and all you got to do is win one or two to go up on the year in terms of parlays. So that's why I'm giving you that one parlay every single weekend, because there's just so much value there, especially in a year where it's the most unpredictable college football season ever. In terms of the spread, underdogs went a crazy 23-7 last week, which is pretty much unheard of. We'll have to see if Vegas adjusts to that, or it's going to be like that all year, and the underdogs are going to continue to thrive in such a weird type season with not as many fans. So we'll have to see what happens there. Before we get started, be sure to like this video and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. In addition to college football picks every Friday, I also do waiver wire picks for fantasy football on Tuesdays. And on Sal Vetri's channel, you can go check out his channel there. I do a NFL player props show that comes out every Friday. My first one just came out today. So if you like betting on the NFL, betting on player props, be sure to check that out as well. Now let's get to it. So the first game we're betting this week, we have the Florida Gators going to College Station, Texas to take on the Texas A&M Aggies. The Gators are currently favored by 6 points, and let's just say that the Florida Gators have looked absolutely fantastic this year so far. They've been phenomenal on offense. The offense is dominant. You have Kyle Trask, the quarterback, who is a clear Heisman candidate at this point. So far this season, he has 684 yards and 10 touchdowns through just 2 games. They dropped 51 points on Ole Miss and then dropped 38 points last week on South Carolina to get a win there. In addition, it's not only Trask on the offense that's dominating, it's also tight end Kyle Pitts, who's sure to be a first-round pick in the 2021 NFL Draft. Now, if you want to hear unheard of, Pitts has 12 catches for 227 yards and 6 touchdowns through 2 games. He had 4 touchdowns in the first game and then 2 touchdowns in the second game. He actually had 6 touchdowns in his first 6 quarters played on the season. He's phenomenal. The Florida offense is unreal. Now, the only thing that could stop this Florida team from going to the college football playoffs is their defense, which has been a little bit shaky this year. They let up 35 points to Ole Miss in the first game. They let up 24 last week to South Carolina. But I do not trust the Texas A&M offense to put up that much points, even against a Florida defense that has been struggling. Kellen Mond, I spoke about this last week in my video. The quarterback of Texas A&M, he has not improved that much since his sophomore season. He's been there for what seems like forever. And I don't really trust this offense, a team that's averaging 20.5 points right now. They put up only 17 points against Vanderbilt in game 1, and they put up 24 points against Bama last week. They couldn't stop anything on defense, in terms of Bama last week. They let up 52 points last week, so they couldn't stop anything there as well. I don't think this Texas A&M team is going to keep up with Florida at all. I think Florida wins this game pretty comfortably and covers the 6-point spread on the road in College Station, further bolstering their resume towards the college football playoff. For our next game, at the 3:30 slate here, we have the number 3 Georgia Bulldogs taking on the number 14 Tennessee Vols. Tennessee has been impressive. They've won 8 straight games dating back to last year, which is the highest winning streak in the country right now. However, they haven't won any of those games against ranked opponents. Now, it's really hard to win in college football. It doesn't really matter who you're playing against. If you're playing FBS teams and you can get 8 straight wins, that's impressive, no matter who you're playing. I'm going to give them credit. However, the Vols have not seen a team like Georgia since they got dismantled by Bama last year. Plus, they're going on the road. Now, this Georgia team also has momentum of their own as they blew out Auburn, completely demolished them 27-6 last weekend. Look, that game was not even close. Georgia was in control the whole time. And I've been looking at the Tennessee results from the past 2 weeks. They did beat South Carolina in game 1, and they beat Missouri in game 2. However, they're relying a lot on the running game. In week 1 against South Carolina, Tennessee ran for 4 yards a carry, and then last week they averaged 4.5 yards a carry, running for a total of 232 yards and 4 touchdowns against Missouri. Now, relying on the run game will not work against Georgia. Georgia, they only allowed 39 rushing yards on 1.8 yards per attempt against Arkansas in week 1, and then last week they only allowed 77 rushing yards on just 2.8 yards per carry. So, the run game is not going to work very well against Georgia. Tennessee's going to have to throw the ball a lot to win this game, to be successful in this game, and I do not trust Tennessee quarterback Jared Guarantano in this game. He's a decent quarterback. He's not a great quarterback. He hasn't done anything so far in his career to convince me that he could beat Georgia, let alone hang with them in a game like this. I think Georgia comes out and wins big, similarly to what they did last week against Auburn, and they cover the 13.5-point spread. They win by more than 2 touchdowns and cover once again. Now moving to our next game at 4 p.m., we have the TCU Horned Frogs at home taking on the Kansas State Wildcats. Now, if there's one thing I've learned through 2 weeks this season, it is take the underdogs in the Big 12. I bet Oklahoma 2 weeks in a row. I lost both those bets, but in my money line parlay last week, I had TCU winning over Texas plus 315, and guess what? They got the job done. Now, I mentioned the stat about underdogs being 23-7 last week. I think that's going to continue heavily in this week, despite the fact that I already took 2 favorites prior to this. So, I'm picking Kansas State in this game. I just think that the spread is 9. What has TCU done to earn a 9-point spread against Kansas State? Kansas State's playing very good football right now. So, since the second half of that Oklahoma game, they beat Oklahoma 2 weeks ago, and then last week they had a 10-point win, 31-21 over Texas Tech. They're throwing the ball well. They're running the ball well. The defense has been good since that second half versus Oklahoma. TCU, they did beat an overrated Texas team last week, but the week prior to that, they lost at home to Iowa State. I don't think this TCU team is very good. I expect this to be your normal, close, back and forth, high-scoring Big 12 game where Kansas State keeps it close enough to cover the 9-point spread. Now moving on to our next game in the nightcap, we have the number 5 Notre Dame Fighting Irish at home against the Florida State Seminoles. Now, Notre Dame has not played for 3 weeks now. The last time they played was September 19th. They've had a game canceled due to COVID troubles. That's been a theme for them pretty much this entire year. They're itching to get out there, and Florida State has been absolutely dreadful this season. They got blown out at Miami. They lost their first game to Georgia Tech, and they were down most of the game last week against Jacksonville State, which was pretty pathetic. They ended up pulling away in the second half of that game to win 41-24, but this Florida State team will not be able to hang with Notre Dame. What's the biggest reason why? Florida State's offensive line is one of the worst in the FBS. Following last season, Pro Football Focus ranked their offensive line situation at 129th in the FBS out of 130 teams. If you just watch their games, the offensive line is so bad that they cannot get anything going at all on offense. I'd be surprised if they even score 17 points this game. And the way that Notre Dame played in their first 2 games, they did put up a lot of points. They only scored 27 against Duke, but then they scored 50 plus against South Florida. They have an experienced quarterback in Ian Book. They have a very, very good backfield led by Kyron Williams, Chris Tyree. I think the offense is good enough to score 38 or more, and I barely think Florida State can eclipse 10. Therefore, I am taking the Fighting Irish minus 21 tomorrow night as my 4th pick. And now to our long shot money line underdog parlay of the week. We're making it a 3-teamer this week. Pretty overconfident maybe after the win last week, but we're going to do it. We won nicely off the parlay last week. We're going to increase to the team this week, and we are going to capitalize on these underdogs winning games, and we are going to take 3-team parlay here instead of 2. So, the first game in this parlay is TCU versus Kansas State. Kansas State comes in at plus 265. I already explained why I like Kansas State to keep it close in this game. I would not be surprised if they pull it out and win this game. On the road is 9-point underdogs plus 265. I'm not going to get too into it because I already spoke about this game, but Kansas State is the first team in this parlay. Now moving on to the second game of this slate here. We have Boston College against Pitt. Boston College is playing at home. They put up a great fight against UNC this week. I knew because I watched the game, and I actually had UNC. If you would watch the video last week, I bet UNC last week. Boston College really, really impressed me. They played a good game at home, and if they were able to take in a 2-point conversion at the end of the game goes to overtime. They did a great job of shutting down an explosive UNC offense led by Sam Howell, plus all their receiving weapons, and a good running back also there in UNC. Boston College's defense did a fantastic job at shutting them down. So, I think we're going to get a really low-scoring game here, Boston College versus Pitt. Pitt is coming off a heartbreaking loss in a game that they were favored by 14 against NC State last week at home. Downward spiraling momentum is a thing in college football. We see it a lot where a team loses one game they're not supposed to lose and then loses a few more consecutively after that. It's a thing in college football because you really can't afford to lose that much in the sport. That's just the way it's set up with, especially if you want to go to a great bowl game. You cannot afford many losses. And once you lose a game that you're really not supposed to lose, it really is, taxing on the team mentally. So I like Boston College here because they just played a game where they're feeling pretty good about themselves. They could have beat a top 10 team in UNC. They played well enough to do it. They just did not execute the 2-point conversion. Pitt, on the other hand, led up 336 yards and 4 touchdowns to NC State's quarterback. NC State is a team that was supposed to be in the middle to bottom of the ACC this year, and I was impressed with Boston College's quarterback last week. Threw for 313 yards and 2 touchdowns. Phil Jerkovich, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I apologize if I am not, but I like this team to get a lot of passing yards against this Pitt secondary, which looked horrible last week, and in a low-scoring game, that'll be enough to propel them to a victory. I'm taking Boston College, who is plus 195 on the line here in this parlay as the second team. For the third game here, we are moving to Lexington as the Kentucky Wildcats take on the Mississippi State Bulldogs at home. Mississippi State is coming off a heartbreaking loss to Arkansas at home after they just beat the defending national champions in week 1. LSU setting a million records with that air raid offense and Mike Leach and KJ Costello. It was pretty ridiculous what we saw from them in week 1, and then to come on and just botch against a team that hasn't won in the SEC in 3 years. That was pretty shocking. I bet Mississippi State. I obviously did not win that bet as Mississippi State lost outright. KJ Costello of Mississippi State is a good quarterback. He threw 3 interceptions last week. It was a bad game. I do not foresee him having 2 bad games in a row. I think they will get their points this week. Kentucky, they've struggled so far this season. They haven't won a game yet, and they're not a team that's going to score that many points. They're usually good defensively, but Ole Miss tore them up last week for 40+. I ultimately think that Kentucky on offense will not be able to keep up with what Mississippi State is going to do on offense, and I think that Mississippi State wins this game and bounces back from that loss last week. The line on that is Mississippi State plus 130. So when you combine all these 3 together in a parlay, you get a little bit over 23-1. So if you were to bet $10 on it, you're getting paid at $238. I think this parlay could hit. I really do. So be sure to tail it. And if you don't tail it and you don't want to put in a 3-team parlay because it's kind of risky, take 2 of these teams from the 3 and make that your parlay instead. Any 2. I don't really have a preference or order of any of them, but in a season where underdogs have reigned supreme, I like the idea of doing these parlays every week. Thank you for watching this video, and like I said before, if you haven't already, like this video. It really helps me out a lot. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at sports_Burd. I would love to just interact with followers talking about these picks all day tomorrow, as well as the other games across the board. We have a lot of good ones tomorrow, specifically Clemson versus Miami at night, and a few more games that I really like. Also, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel. That really helps me out a lot, and I'm looking forward to the slate tomorrow. Goodbye, everyone, and good luck with your gambling picks.